You're in danger. Pretend I'm your husband. Don't scream. Just take my hand and pretend you're mine. Gabriele Sawyer smoothed the red silk against her thighs. But the fabric offered no comfort. The Manhattan ballroom stretched before her like a gilded trap, all crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes catching light like tiny warnings. She didn't belong here among the diamond necklaces and designer tuxedos. But that was precisely the point. No one would suspect the woman in the borrowed dress and cheap heels of being anything more than another social climber. The air smelled of expensive perfume and older money. Somewhere a string quartet played something classical, the notes weaving through conversations she couldn't quite hear. Gabriela's fingers found the thin gold chain at her throat. Aiden's chain, the last thing she had of her twin brother. Her sister Isabella had died years before that. Another wound their family never recovered from. 6 months. It had been 6 months since they'd pulled his body from the East River. 6 months of pretending to grieve while secretly planning this moment. 6 months of letting Agent Bellini mold her into whatever he needed her to be. The metal was warm against her skin, a reminder. Not of why she was here. She knew that cold and clear. But of who she'd been before grief had carved her hollow, before rage had filled the empty spaces. She'd rehearsed this moment for weeks with Bellini. Approach the target, make contact, plant the device. Simple, clinical, but her heart hammered against her ribs as she scanned the crowd, searching for the man who represented everything she'd sworn to destroy. Before we begin this tale of forbidden devotion and dangerous secrets, let me know where in the world you're listening from today, and hit that subscribe button to join our family of devoted listeners. And thank you from my heart for helping this channel reach 5,000 subscribers. You made this moment possible. Now, prepare yourself. You are walking into the most dangerous, beautiful night of Gabriele's life. Gabriele spotted him by the bar. Arturo Ricardo. Even in a room full of power brokers, he commanded attention. Sharp jawline, slicked back dark hair, a fitted black suit that molded to him like it had been crafted by hands that feared him and adored him. But it was the tattoos creeping up his neck that marked him, intricate designs disappearing beneath his collar like secrets he wore on his skin. Killer, she reminded herself. Mobster. The man whose organization was responsible for countless deaths. Possibly, probably, including Aiden's. She moved toward him, each step deliberate, her prepared cover story balanced on the tip of her tongue. The crowd seemed to part around him naturally, instinctively, the way prey gives space to a predator. Gabriele's breath caught as she closed the distance, rehearsing her opening line one final time. But before she could speak, before she could execute the plan Bellini had mapped out so carefully, Arturo turned. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that froze her mid-step, not the casual glance of a stranger, not even the interested look of a man noticing an attractive woman. This was recognition. This was purpose. And beneath it, something she couldn't name. Something that made her skin prickle with warning. He moved into her space so quickly she didn't have time to retreat. Suddenly he was there, his presence overwhelming, his expensive cologne mixing with something darker underneath. Smoke and leather and danger. The noise of the party faded to static. His hand found the small of her back, pulling her closer with a familiarity that should have been threatening. His touch was firm but not painful, commanding but strangely protective. Gabriele's pulse thundered in her ears as his lips brushed against her earlobe, his breath warm and urgent. "Don't scream! Don't run!" he whispered, his voice rough and low, carrying the weight of 100 unspoken secrets. "Just take my hand and pretend you're mine." Gabriele's shock wasn't an act. Her carefully constructed plan shattered in an instant. Who was watching them? Why would a mafia boss protect her? And why did every instinct scream two contradictory warnings? Run and stay. Arturo's hand tightened on her waist, not painfully, but with unmistakable authority. His eyes flickered past her to something in the crowd. Not toward the exit, not toward his associates, but toward a figure she couldn't quite see. The look on his face wasn't fear. It was calculation. "Smile," he murmured against her hair, his other hand coming up to her face with surprising gentleness. To anyone watching, they would look like lovers reuniting, like a husband greeting his wife with intimate affection. But Gabriella could feel the tension coiled in his muscles, could see the predatory alertness in his gaze even as he played the role of devoted spouse. The grand ballroom suddenly felt smaller, the glittering crowd no longer elegant but threatening. Every face could be watching, every smile could hide a weapon, and the man holding her, the dangerous tattooed criminal she'd come here to destroy, was now the only solid thing in a room that had become quicksand. He should be my target, Gabrielle thought, her mind racing even as her body followed his lead. He should be the enemy. So why does his touch feel like the only safe thing in this room? But she wasn't naive enough to trust that feeling. Not yet. Not when Aiden's blood had barely dried. Gabriella's training kicked in through the shock. She forced her lips into something resembling a smile, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. Beneath the expensive fabric, his heart beat steady and strong. "Who?" she breathed, barely moving her lips. "Don't look," Arturo commanded softly. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, the gesture intimate, but his touch clinical, positioning her face away from whoever he'd spotted. "There's a man in a gray suit near the northeast pillar. Silver hair. He's been watching you since you walked in." Gabrielle's blood ran cold. Agent Bellini had assured her she'd be invisible tonight. Just another face in a sea of Manhattan's elite, playing a role until she could make contact with Arturo and plant the tracking device. But Bellini hadn't mentioned anyone else, hadn't warned her about being watched, unless he had known. Unless this was part of some plan she hadn't been told about. The thought made her stomach clench. "I don't understand," she whispered, trying to maintain the facade of a loving reunion while her mind raced. "Why are you helping me?" Arturo's jaw tightened. For a moment, something raw and almost vulnerable flickered across his features before the mask of control slammed back into place. "Because the man watching you isn't one of mine." He paused, his dark eyes boring into hers with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. "And because you're going to get yourself killed playing whatever game you think you're playing." He knew. Or suspected. Either way, her cover was compromised. Gabrielle's hand instinctively moved toward the small device hidden in her clutch, but Arturo caught her wrist with lightning speed. "Don't," he said, his voice still gentle but edged with steel. "Whatever you're reaching for, whatever you think you need to do, don't. Not here, not now. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't." His honesty was startling. "But right now, I'm offering you a choice. You can make a scene, try to run, and see how far you get with the man in gray following you. Or you can dance with me. Let me get you somewhere safe, and then we'll talk about why a journalist is at my party wearing a wire." The world tilted. How did he know she was a journalist? How much did he know? "I'm not." Gabrielle Sawyer, twin sister of Aiden Sawyer, found dead 6 months ago. Investigative journalist for the Tribune, until you took a leave of absence after his funeral. Arturo's recitation was quiet, factual, devastating. "You've been seen meeting with FBI agents. You quit your job 3 weeks ago. And tonight, you showed up at my party in a dress that doesn't fit and shoes that hurt, trying very hard to look like you belong." Terror and fury warred in Gabrielle's chest. He'd been watching her, investigating her, knowing about her while she knew nothing real about him. "Did you kill him?" The question tore from her throat before she could stop it. "Did you kill my brother?" Something flashed in Arturo's eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. But he didn't get a chance to answer. The man in the gray suit was moving through the crowd toward them, his hand inside his jacket in a way that made Arturo's entire body tense. "We're leaving," Arturo said, his tone brooking no argument. "Right now, decide fast. Do you trust me enough to walk out of here alive? Or do you want to test your luck with him?" Gabrielle looked past Arturo's shoulder, catching a glimpse of silver hair, cold eyes, a predatory grace that reminded her of documentaries about sharks. Nothing about that man suggested FBI agent. Nothing about him suggested he wanted to protect her. She thought of Aiden, of the questions that had haunted her for 6 months, of the gap between the official story and what her gut had screamed was true. And she thought of Bellini's face when he'd told her about this mission, how he'd looked away when she'd asked direct questions, how he'd deflected. "One condition," she said, making a choice that would either save her life or end it. You answer my questions. All of them. Honestly. Arturo's smile was sharp and sad and strangely beautiful. I can't promise honesty about everything, but I can promise I didn't kill your brother. His grip on her waist gentled, became almost protective. And I can promise that if we don't move in the next 30 seconds, neither of us will leave this room alive. Gabriele's fingers curled into the lapel of his jacket. Then let's move. The service exit led to a narrow hallway, stark white and utilitarian, the beautiful illusion of the party giving way to the reality beneath. Arturo moved with the confidence of a man who'd mapped every exit long before arriving, his hand never leaving Gabriele's as he pulled her through a maze of corridors that smelled of industrial cleaner and old carpet. Behind them, she heard shouts, the sound of rapid footsteps. Arturo increased their pace but didn't run. Running would draw attention, mark them as prey. Act natural, he murmured, guiding her around a corner just as a door burst open behind them. He pulled her into an alcove, pressing her back against the wall, his body shielding hers from view. They stood frozen, breath held, as footsteps pounded past. Gabriele could feel every point of contact between them, his chest against hers, his thigh pressed between her legs, his hand splayed protectively over her ribs. This close, she could see the individual threads of his expensive suit, could smell cedar and whiskey beneath the cologne. This close, she could see the tattoo that wound up his neck wasn't just decorative. It was a serpent, coiled around thorns, its fangs bared, beautiful and dangerous, like the man himself. You have a lot of exits planned, she whispered when the footsteps faded. I don't go anywhere without 3 ways out. Arturo's voice was low, intimate by necessity. Habit from staying alive this long. And how long is that? Too long. His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something beneath the controlled exterior. Exhaustion, maybe. Or regret. Come on. My car's in the underground garage. They made it to the loading dock without further incident. A black car waited, engine running, windows tinted so dark Gabriele couldn't see inside. Every instinct screamed that getting into that car was a terrible idea, that once those doors closed, she'd be at Arturo Ricardo's mercy, and men like him didn't have mercy. But the alternative was going back to Bellini, to questions she couldn't answer and a handler who might have deliberately sent her into danger. She thought of Aiden again, of his last message, 3 days before he died. Gabby, if something happens to me, don't trust the official story, don't trust anyone. Find the truth yourself. Maybe the truth was in this car. Arturo opened the door, his expression unreadable. Last chance to change your mind. Gabriele climbed inside. The interior was leather and low light, the driver separated from them by a privacy screen that slid up immediately after Arturo entered. They pulled out of the garage smoothly, the city sliding past the tinted windows in a blur of neon and shadow. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Gabriele pressed against the far side of the seat, maintaining distance, her heart still racing from the escape. Arturo sat with one arm draped across the back of the seat, his posture relaxed, but she didn't miss how his other hand rested near his hip, near where she assumed he kept a weapon. Where are you taking me? She finally asked. Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk without being overheard. Arturo's gaze was steady, assessing. You wanted answers. I'll give you some. But first I need you to understand something. What? The game you think you're playing? His voice was soft, almost gentle. You don't know the rules. You don't know the players. And you definitely don't know what you've walked into. Anger flared in Gabriele's chest, hot and welcome after the fear. Don't patronize me. I know exactly what I walked into. I've been investigating your organization for months. I know about the drug running, the protection rackets, the bodies that turn up in the river. You know what you've been told, Arturo interrupted, his tone still measured. You know the story that's been carefully constructed for you, but you don't know the truth. And you do? I know enough. He shifted slightly, his body angling toward her. Tell me something. When your brother was investigating organized crime, when he was collecting evidence, did he ever mention my name to you? Gabriele hesitated. The truth was, Aiden had been secretive about his work in those final months. Protective. He'd stopped sharing details, stopped asking her opinion on leads. She'd thought he was trying to shield her from something dangerous. She'd thought wrong. No, she admitted. He didn't mention you specifically. But he mentioned someone. Some organization he was trying to expose. How do you? Because he came to me, Arturo said quietly. 2 days before he died, your brother walked into one of my clubs and asked to speak with me. Said he had information about corruption in the FBI. Said he needed help from someone outside the system because everyone inside it was compromised. Gabriele's breath caught. You're lying. I wish I were. Something like grief passed through Arturo's eyes. I told him to wait, to let me verify what he was claiming, to make sure we weren't both walking into a trap. I told him to lie low, stay safe, and I'd have answers within the week. And 3 days later, he was dead. Arturo's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath skin. By the time I realized the threat was real, it was too late to save him. So I did the next best thing. I've spent the last 6 months collecting evidence, watching the people who killed him, waiting for the right moment to act. Why? Gabriela demanded, her voice cracking. Why would you care about some journalist you didn't know? Why risk your organization? Because I'm tired, Arturo said simply. The confession seemed to cost him something. I'm tired of the violence, the lies, the bodies. I've been trying to find a way out of this life for years. Your brother offered me something I'd stopped believing in. What? A chance at redemption. His smile was bitter. A chance to be something other than the monster everyone thinks I am. The car slowed, turning into an underground garage. Gabriele recognized the building. Exclusive condos overlooking the Hudson. The kind of place where penthouses sold for tens of millions. Of course Arturo Ricardo would own property here. You don't know me, Gabriele said as the car stopped. You don't know if you can trust me. No, Arturo agreed, climbing out and extending his hand to help her. But your brother trusted you enough to die trying to protect you. That's good enough for me. The penthouse was everything Gabriele expected and nothing she'd prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city at night, but heavy curtains muted the view, turning Manhattan into a collection of distant lights. The interior was surprisingly sparse. Minimal furniture, empty walls, an apartment that felt more like a way station than a home. I don't live here, Arturo said, reading her thoughts. This is a safe house, somewhere to go when I need to think, or when things get complicated. How often do things get complicated? More than I'd like. He moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets that revealed an impressive array of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses without asking, sliding one across the counter toward her. You should sit. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. Gabriele didn't sit. She stood with the counter between them, a physical barrier that felt necessary. Just tell me, who killed my brother? Agent Bellini. The name landed like a physical blow. Gabriele's fingers tightened on the glass until she worried it might shatter. No, that's impossible. Bellini was Aiden's contact at the FBI. He's the one who came to me after the funeral, who offered to help me find justice. He came to you to control you, Arturo said quietly. To make sure you didn't ask the wrong questions or look in the wrong places, to turn you into an asset he could use or eliminate as needed. You expect me to believe that? Gabriele's voice rose, anger replacing shock. You, a criminal, expect me to believe that an FBI agent murdered my brother? That everything I've been told for 6 months is a lie? I expect you to look at the evidence. Arturo pulled out his phone, connected it to a large screen on the wall. I'm going to show you something. Once you see it, there's no going back. You won't be able to unknow this. Gabriele wanted to leave, wanted to run back to her apartment, back to the comfortable certainty of her grief and rage. But Aiden's chain hung heavy around her neck, and his last words echoed in her mind. Don't trust anyone. Find the truth yourself. Show me, she said. Arturo pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Surveillance from a warehouse district. The timestamp read 6 months ago, just hours before Aiden's estimated time of death. Gabriele watched as her brother appeared on screen, alive, whole, his face animated as he spoke to someone just out of frame. Then the other figure moved into view, Agent Bellini. Gabriele's glass slipped from her nerveless fingers. It hit the floor with a dull thud, whiskey soaking into the pristine carpet, but she couldn't look away from the screen, couldn't process what she was seeing. The video had no sound, but she didn't need it. Body language told the story. Aiden gesturing sharply, clearly refusing something. Bellini's face hardening, his hand moving to his hip, the argument escalating. And then Bellini drew his weapon. Arturo paused the footage just before the trigger pulled. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know this isn't what you wanted to see." Gabriele couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 6 months of grief, of planning, of letting Bellini guide her toward this moment. All of it built on a lie. The man who'd held her at the funeral, who'd promised justice, who'd molded her into his perfect asset. He'd murdered Aiden. The room spun. Gabriele's legs gave out, and suddenly Arturo was there, catching her before she hit the ground, guiding her to the couch with careful hands. She sat frozen, staring at the paused image of her brother alive, unknowing that he had seconds left to live. "Why?" The word came out broken, barely audible. "Your brother discovered that Bellini had been feeding information to Silas Thorne for years. Witness locations, raid schedules, evidence collected during investigations. Aiden tracked the payments to an offshore account and came to me with proof, hoping I'd help him expose the corruption." Arturo's voice was hollow, haunted. "I told him to wait, to let me verify everything first. I didn't want to act without being certain, and he went to confront Bellini alone," Gabriele finished. "Yes, and Bellini executed him to protect the pipeline between the FBI and Thorne." Arturo moved to crouch in front of her, careful not to touch, giving her space. "I'm sorry. I should have moved faster. Should have protected him." The apology cracked something inside Gabriele. She launched herself at him, fists striking his chest with all the force of her anguish. "You let him die. You could have stopped this." Arturo didn't defend himself. He knelt there, absorbing every blow, his face carved from stone. "Yes. He trusted you." Gabriele's voice rose to a scream. "He thought you would help him. I know. And now he's dead, because you weren't fast enough." Her strikes weakened, exhaustion replacing fury. "Because you were too careful. I know." Arturo caught her wrists gently as her arms dropped. "I know, Gabriele. I've lived with that failure every day since." She collapsed against him, sobs tearing from her throat. All the tears she'd held back during the funeral, during the investigation, during the lonely months of planning revenge. They poured out now in a torrent. And Arturo held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist, supporting her weight as she broke apart. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you." Time lost meaning. Gabriele cried until there was nothing left, until her throat was raw and her body felt like lead. Slowly, awareness returned. The solid warmth of Arturo's body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her cheek, the surprising gentleness of hands that she knew were capable of violence. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy, all her carefully maintained composure shattered. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe that your brother was trying to do the right thing. Believe that he died a hero." Arturo's thumb brushed away the tears on her cheeks with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "And believe that I will do everything in my power to make sure his death wasn't meaningless." "How?" Gabriele's voice was hoarse. "How do we fight this? Bellini has the entire FBI behind him. Thorne has money, connections, power. We use the evidence your brother collected. We expose them both." Arturo stood, offering his hand to help her up. "But we have to be smart about it. Strategic. One wrong move and we're both dead." Gabriele let him pull her to her feet, though she swayed slightly, exhaustion making her clumsy. "I don't even know where to start." "Start by getting some rest." Arturo guided her toward a hallway. "There's a guest room down the hall. Everything you need is there. In the morning we'll make a plan." She should protest, should demand more answers, more details, but her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her mind fogged with shock and grief, and the beginnings of something that might eventually become acceptance. The guest room was simple but comfortable. White sheets, soft pillows, blackout curtains that promised oblivion. Arturo lingered in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" Gabrielle asked, turning to face him. "Really? Why risk everything to help me?" For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stepped into the room, closing the distance between them, his hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "Because your brother reminded me of who I could have been," he said quietly. "Before this life claimed me, before I became the thing everyone fears." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "And because you walked into a den of wolves trying to find truth, that kind of courage deserves to be protected." "That's not an answer." "No." His smile was sad, self-aware. "The real answer is that I've been looking for a reason to believe I'm more than the monster in the mirror. Your brother gave me that reason, and now you're offering me a chance to prove it." He stepped back, his hand falling away, leaving her skin cold where he'd touched. "Get some rest, Gabrielle. Tomorrow we start planning your brother's revenge." He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. Gabriella stood in the center of the unfamiliar room, her reflection staring back at her from a mirror on the far wall. She looked nothing like the confident journalist who'd walked into that gala hours ago. She looked like a woman who'd had her entire world upended, who'd learned that everything she believed was a carefully constructed lie. She looked like a woman at war. Good, she thought fiercely, pulling Aiden's gold chain from around her neck and clutching it tight, because war was exactly what she was about to wage. But first, she needed to sleep. To let her mind process the impossible truths Arturo had revealed, to prepare for whatever came next. She collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, too exhausted to change, and closed her eyes. Sleep came surprisingly quickly, dragging her down into darkness. But her dreams were filled with surveillance footage, with Bellini's face, with the moment before the gun fired, with all the ways she should have seen the truth, with all the ways she'd failed. Gabrielle woke to unfamiliar silence. No traffic sounds from the street below, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just the muted hum of expensive climate control and the distant whisper of the city far below. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory returned in fragments. The gala, Arturo's warning, the surveillance footage, Aiden's face frozen in his final moments. She sat up, finding herself still in yesterday's clothes, wrinkled and uncomfortable. The clock on the nightstand read 6:47 a.m. She'd slept for barely 5 hours, but her body refused to stay still. Grief and rage were poor bedfellows for rest. The smell of coffee drew her from the room. She found Arturo in the kitchen, dressed in dark jeans and a black t-shirt that revealed more of his tattoos, intricate patterns that wound down both arms like stories written in ink. He looked up as she entered, his expression careful, assessing. "Coffee?" he asked, already pouring a second cup. "Please." Gabrielle moved to the counter, keeping distance between them. In the harsh morning light, last night felt surreal. The crying, the comfort, the vulnerability, all of it seemed like something that had happened to someone else. Arturo slid the cup across the marble surface. Black, no sugar. How did he know? "You've been watching me," she said. Not a question. "Since you started meeting with Bellini. I needed to understand who you were, what you knew." His honesty was disarming. "I needed to know if you were a threat or a victim." "And what did you decide?" "Both." His lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're dangerous because you ask the right questions, and you're in danger because of those same questions." Gabriella took a sip of coffee, using the moment to study him. In daylight, Arturo looked younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, though the hardness in his eyes suggested someone much older. The tattoos on his neck disappeared beneath his shirt collar, and she found herself wondering how far they extended, what other secrets he wore on his skin. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out what your brother found, what evidence he collected that was worth killing for." Arturo moved around the counter, maintaining careful distance but close enough that she could smell cedar and coffee. "You said Bellini gave you a flash drive to plant on me last night. Do you still have it?" Gabrielle's hand went to her clutch, still sitting where she'd dropped it last night. She pulled out the small device, holding it up. "This? It's supposed to contain tracking software. Or that's what Bellini told me. May I? She handed it over, watching as Arturo examined it with practiced efficiency. He moved to a laptop on the desk, booted it up, and plugged in the drive. His fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code scrolling past too fast for Gabriele to follow. It's not tracking software, he said after a moment. It's fabricated evidence. Financial records showing payments from me to various criminal enterprises. If you'd successfully planted this, it would have given the FBI everything they needed to arrest me. But that was the point, was it? Arturo turned to face her, his expression grave. Think about it. Bellini sends you, an untrained civilian with no field experience, into a dangerous situation to plant evidence on one of the most cautious criminals in New York. What are the chances you'd succeed? Gabriele's stomach clenched. He expected me to fail. He expected you to get caught. Or killed. Either way, you'd be eliminated as a loose end, and he'd still have plausible deniability. Arturo's voice gentled slightly. You were never meant to leave that gala alive. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they ignited something cold and focused in her chest. Then why warn me? Why not let it happen? Because your brother asked me to protect you. He didn't know you. Not really. You said he only came to you 2 days before. He knew enough. Arturo's jaw tightened. We talked for 3 hours that night. He told me about his investigation, about the evidence he'd gathered, and he told me about his sister, the journalist who'd inspired him to chase truth in the first place, the twin who'd lost their father to corruption and refused to let injustice stand. Gabriele's throat closed. He talked about Dad? He said you blamed yourself for not seeing the signs, that you'd spent years trying to prove your father's death wasn't an accident. Arturo moved closer, his presence steady but not threatening. He said if anything happened to him, you'd do something reckless, something brave and stupid and dangerous. He was right. I know. That's why I've been watching you. Waiting for the moment Bellini would make his move. Arturo's hand lifted as if to touch her, then dropped back to his side. I made a promise to your brother. I don't break my promises. Gabriele wanted to believe him, desperately, but trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Show me more. Show me proof that Bellini killed Aiden. Not just surveillance footage, actual evidence I can use. There's something you need to understand first. Arturo returned to the laptop, pulling up files. Bellini didn't act alone. He's part of a larger network. And the man at the top, the one who's been pulling strings for years, is Silas Thorne. The name meant nothing to Gabriele, who, old money, old power. On paper, he's a philanthropist and businessman. In reality, he runs half the criminal operations on the East Coast, and he does it through proxies and carefully maintained distance. Arturo pulled up photographs. Thorne at charity galas, Thorne shaking hands with politicians, Thorne looking every inch the respectable billionaire. He uses people like Bellini to do his dirty work while keeping his own hands clean. And you think he ordered Aiden's death? I know he did. Arturo's voice was flat, certain. Your brother discovered the connection between Bellini and Thorne. He found financial records, communications, evidence that could bring down Thorne's entire operation. That's why he had to die. Gabriele stared at the photographs, memorizing every detail of Thorne's face. Silver hair, cold eyes, a smile that never reached them. He looked like someone's grandfather, benevolent and harmless. He looked nothing like a killer. Where's the evidence? She asked. Where's what Aiden found? That's what we need to figure out. Arturo closed the laptop, turning to face her fully. Your brother was paranoid about keeping the evidence safe. He told me he'd hidden it somewhere personal, somewhere only someone who really knew him would think to look. Gabriele's mind raced through possibilities. Aiden's apartment had been cleaned out months ago, his office cleared. She'd gone through everything, searching for clues, finding nothing but normal possessions and everyday items. Unless, the music box, she breathed. Arturo's expression sharpened. What music box? He gave it to me for our 18th birthday. Vintage, plays Clair de Lune. I kept it on my bookshelf. Gabriele's heart raced. 3 days before he died, he came to my apartment. Spent 20 minutes just staring at it. I thought he was being sentimental, but he was making sure you'd remember it. Arturo finished. Where is it now? My apartment. Gabriele was already moving, looking for her shoes. We need to go get it. Arturo caught her arm, stopping her. Your apartment will be watched. Bellini knows you went off script last night. He'll have people monitoring your building, waiting to see if you surface. Then we need a distraction. We need more than that. Arturo pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like surveillance reports. We need to know exactly who's watching and whether they're FBI or Thorne's people. And we need an exit strategy in case things go wrong. Frustration burned in Gabriele's chest. So, what do we do? Just wait here while the evidence sits in my apartment? We plan. We prepare. And we move when the odds are in our favor. Arturo's tone was firm but not unkind. I understand your urgency, but rushing in without a strategy is how people die. He was right. Gabriele knew he was right. But every hour they waited was another hour. Bellini and Thorne had to cover their tracks, to eliminate witnesses, to consolidate power. How long? She asked. 24 hours. Maybe 48. Arturo set down his phone, giving her his full attention. In the meantime, I need to know everything you know. Everything Bellini told you. Everything he had you do. Any detail could be important. Gabriele nodded, moving to the couch and sinking into the leather. For the next 2 hours, she walked Arturo through the past 3 months. Bellini's initial approach at the funeral, the training sessions, the carefully constructed cover story, the mission briefings. She told him about the other agents she'd met, the equipment she'd been given, the locations they'd had her scout. Arturo listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. He was thorough, Arturo said when she finished. Building a complete file on you. Learning your patterns, your weaknesses, your motivations. Also, he could use me and throw me away. Yes. No sugarcoating, no false comfort. Just brutal honesty. But he made a mistake. What mistake? He underestimated you. Arturo's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. He thought you were just a grieving sister looking for revenge. He didn't account for the journalist underneath, the investigator who notices details and asks uncomfortable questions. I didn't notice enough, Gabriele said bitterly. I walked right into his trap. You survived. That's what matters. Arturo stood, offering his hand. Come on. I'll show you something that might help. He led her to a room she hadn't noticed last night. A study lined with filing cabinets and computers, surveillance monitors showing various locations around the city. It looked like a command center, and Gabriele realized with a jolt that this was how Arturo maintained control. Not through violence alone, but through information. I've been investigating Bellini and Thorne for 6 months, Arturo explained, pulling up files on one of the computers. Your brother gave me a starting point, and I've built on it. Financial records, phone intercepts, witness statements. Everything I could gather without tipping them off. Gabriele leaned closer, scanning the documents. They were meticulous, detailed, painting a picture of corruption that went deeper than she'd imagined. Bellini wasn't just one dirty agent. He was part of a network that included prosecutors, judges, police captains. This is insane, she breathed. How has no one noticed? People notice. But Thorne is very good at making problems disappear. Arturo pulled up a file labeled Casualties. Names filled the screen, dozens of them, each marked with a date and brief description. Witnesses who died in accidents. Journalists who stopped investigating. Police who took early retirement. Gabriele's eyes caught on one name near the bottom. Aiden Sawyer. Marked with a red flag. Why is Aiden flagged differently? Because he's the only one who got close enough to matter. The only one who found evidence that could actually bring Thorne down. Arturo closed the file, turning to face her. That evidence is what we need to find. Everything else I have is circumstantial, suggestive but not definitive. What your brother collected, that's the smoking gun. And it's in my apartment. In a music box. Probably being watched by people who want us dead. Probably. Arturo's lips quirked. But I have an idea. The plan was insane, risky, dependent on timing and luck, and a dozen variables they couldn't control. Gabriele hated it immediately. "Absolutely not," she said when Arturo finished explaining. "There's no way I'm letting you walk in there alone." "I won't be alone. I'll have backup positioned throughout the building." Arturo pointed to the map he'd spread across the desk, showing sightlines and escape routes. "But you can't be seen. If Bellini's people spot you, the whole operation is compromised. So I'm just supposed to wait here while you risk your life for my brother's evidence?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "Because if something goes wrong, you're the only one who can finish this. You're the journalist. You know how to take evidence and turn it into a story that can't be ignored." Gabriele wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was capable of helping, of being more than a liability. But the truth was, she had no training for this kind of operation. She'd be a distraction at best, a fatal mistake at worst. "I hate this," she muttered. "Good. Hate keeps you sharp." Arturo's hand came to rest on her shoulder, a brief touch that carried more comfort than it should. "I'll have you on comms the entire time. You'll hear everything, see everything through body cameras. If something goes wrong, you get out. There's a car in the garage with keys in the ignition and a go bag in the trunk. Cash, IDs, everything you need to disappear. And leave you behind, if necessary." His expression was grave, final. "I'm not letting you die for this, Gabriele. Your brother made me promise to protect you. That promise stands even if it costs me my life." The words should have sounded melodramatic. Instead, they sounded like a vow, like something Arturo meant down to his bones. "When?" Gabriele asked, her throat tight. "Tonight, 3 a.m. Minimal traffic, minimal witnesses. My people will create a distraction at the coffee shop across the street. Small fire in the kitchen. Nothing serious, but enough to draw attention. While Bellini's watchers are focused on that, I go in through the service entrance, get the music box, and get out. And if they're watching the service entrance too, then I improvise." Arturo's smile was sharp, dangerous. "I'm very good at improvising." The rest of the day dragged by with excruciating slowness. Arturo made calls, coordinating with people whose names Gabriele didn't catch, speaking in code she couldn't decipher. She tried to focus on reviewing files, on memorizing faces and names and connections, but her mind kept drifting to all the ways tonight could go wrong. Around noon, Arturo ordered food, Thai from a place that apparently knew better than to ask questions about delivery to safe houses. They ate in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. "Tell me about your brother," Arturo said suddenly. "Not the investigation, just him." Gabriele looked up, surprised by the request. "Why?" "Because I want to understand what I'm fighting for, what he died trying to protect." Something in his voice made Gabriele set down her fork. "He was brilliant, funny, had this terrible habit of leaving notes everywhere. On napkins, receipts, random scraps of paper. Our apartment always looked like a tornado hit it." Arturo's expression softened slightly. "What else?" He was stubborn. Once he decided something was right, nothing could change his mind. "Our dad was like that too." Gabriele's fingers found Aiden's chain around her neck. After Dad died, Aiden became obsessed with truth, with making sure people in power couldn't hide behind money and influence. He gave up a lucrative job at a law firm to become an investigative journalist, made almost nothing, lived in a shoebox apartment, and was happier than he'd ever been. He sounds like someone I would have liked to know better. He would have liked you too. Eventually. Gabriele managed a small smile. After he got over being suspicious of you. Smart man. They fell silent again, but it was more comfortable now. Less like two strangers forced together by circumstance, more like allies finding common ground. As evening approached, Arturo's mood shifted. He became focused, intense, checking equipment, and running through contingencies. Gabriele watched him prepare, noting the weapons he concealed beneath his jacket, the way he moved with practiced efficiency. This was the other side of him, the dangerous side, the part that had built an empire through violence and fear. "You're staring," Arturo said without looking up. "I'm trying to reconcile who you are with what you do. Good luck with that." His tone was wry, self-aware. I haven't managed it myself yet. At 2:30 a.m., they moved to the surveillance room. Arturo fitted Gabriele with an earpiece and showed her how to monitor the multiple camera feeds that would track his progress. His team was already in position, invisible shadows waiting for his signal. Last chance to tell me this is a terrible idea, Arturo said, checking his watch. It's a terrible idea, Gabriele confirmed. But do it anyway. He smiled, quick and genuine. Then his expression shuddered into something cold and controlled. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, you leave. No heroics, no rescue attempts. You get out and you finish what your brother started. Understood? Understood. Arturo moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. He crossed to where Gabriele sat, cupped her face in his hands, and pressed a brief, fierce kiss to her forehead. Stay safe. Then he was gone. And Gabriele was alone with the monitors and the silence and her hammering heart. The cameras showed Arturo exiting the building, moving through shadows with liquid grace. She watched him navigate streets, avoiding the obvious watchers posted near her apartment building. At exactly 3 a.m., a small commotion erupted at the coffee shop. Smoke, people shouting, the watchers turning to look. Arturo slipped through the service entrance like a ghost. I'm in. His voice came through the earpiece, quiet and controlled. Heading to your apartment now. Which floor? 4th. Apartment 4C. Gabriele's hands clenched into fists. There's a loose panel near the door frame. I keep a spare key there. She watched through his body camera as he found the key, opened her door, stepped into the familiar chaos of her home. Books everywhere, research papers stacked on every surface. Aiden's leather jacket still draped over the couch. The music box is on the bookshelf. Left side, second shelf from the top. The camera panned across her apartment, and Gabriele's breath caught. Someone had been here. Papers were slightly disturbed, cushions not quite where she'd left them. Someone had searched her space. Arturo, she warned. Someone's been. I see it. His voice remained calm, but she heard the tension beneath. Getting the box now. The camera focused on the music box. Delicate, antique, exactly as she remembered. Arturo's hands came into view, carefully lifting it from the shelf. Then the door burst open. Gun! Arturo's voice was sharp. The camera spun as he dove behind the couch. The music box clutched to his chest. Gabriele caught glimpses of movement, heard the sharp crack of gunfire. Arturo! She screamed into the mic, but he couldn't respond. She watched helplessly as the camera showed him returning fire, moving with lethal efficiency, taking down one attacker, then another. But there were more. Too many. Getting out. Arturo grunted, and the camera showed him crashing through her window onto the fire escape. Gunfire followed, metal pinging where bullets struck around him. He descended with reckless speed, jumped the last 6 feet to the alley below, and ran. The camera feed jerked wildly as he sprinted through narrow passages, vaulted over obstacles, the music box still clutched in one hand. Behind him, Gabriele heard shouts, the pounding of pursuing feet. Heading to extraction point Beta, Arturo said, breathing hard. They made us. Someone tipped them off. Gabriele's stomach dropped. A mole. There was a mole in Arturo's organization. Thorne placed his mole in my organization years before you or your brother entered the picture. Someone buried deep enough that even I missed the signs. She watched through the camera as he led his pursuers on a chase through the industrial district, using his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage. He was good. Better than good. But the people chasing him were professionals. 3 blocks out, Arturo reported. I'm going to lose them in the feed cut to black. Arturo? Gabriele's voice rose. Arturo! Static. Nothing but static, and the terrible silence of a terminated connection. Gabriele stared at the dead screens, her heart in her throat. He could be hurt, captured, dead. She'd sent him into danger for her brother's evidence, and now, the secure phone on the desk rang. Gabriele grabbed it with shaking hands. Hello? It's me. Arturo's voice, strained but alive. I'm okay. Lost them in the subway tunnels, but we have a problem. The mole. Yes, someone knew I was going to your apartment. Someone with access to my plans. He paused. I'm coming back. But Gabriella, we need to change locations. This safe house is compromised. Where do we go? Somewhere they won't think to look. Arturo's voice carried a note of grim determination. Somewhere we can examine what your brother left us without being interrupted. Did you get it, the music box? I got it. And Gabriele? He paused. Whatever's inside, it's worth killing for. We almost died tonight for this. Then let's make sure it was worth it. They met at a different location. A warehouse in Red Hook that Arturo swore only 2 people knew about. He arrived 30 minutes after their call, limping slightly, his jacket torn, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage on his arm. You're hurt, Gabriella said, reaching for him instinctively. Flesh wound. Bullet grazed me. Arturo waved off her concern, setting the music box carefully on a workbench. It looks worse than it is. You need stitches. Later. His focus was entirely on the music box now, examining it with careful hands. Help me open this. Gabriella moved beside him, her fingers trembling as she wound the key. Claire de Lune played, tinny and sweet, achingly familiar. She'd listened to this song 1,000 times, never knowing it might hold the key to her brother's final message. There, Arturo said, pointing to a tiny seam in the base. Invisible, unless you knew to look. Hidden compartment. Together, they worked the catch. The false bottom popped open, revealing a small leather-bound ledger. Gabriele's breath caught as she lifted it out. The leather was worn, familiar. She recognized it as one of Aiden's notebooks, the kind he always carried. She flipped it open, and her vision blurred with tears. Page after page of handwritten notes in Aiden's distinctive scrawl, documenting payments, meetings, names. This wasn't just evidence of Bellini's corruption. It was a complete map of Thorne's entire operation. Jesus, Arturo breathed, reading over her shoulder. He documented everything: financial transfers, witness tampering, evidence destruction. This is enough to bring down dozens of people. Gabriele turned pages, her hands shaking. Aiden had been so thorough, so meticulous. Dates, times, amounts, locations, everything needed to prove conspiracy. He'd built a case that couldn't be dismissed or explained away, and it had gotten him killed. There's more, Arturo said, pointing to codes written in the margins. Bank account numbers, offshore holdings. He tracked the money all the way up the chain. To Thorne? To Thorne. Arturo's expression was grim. This proves he's been running criminal operations for at least 5 years, maybe longer, but it was the last entry that made Gabriele's blood run cold. Written just days before his death. Tonight I'm meeting with AR. If something happens to me, Gabby needs to find him. He's the only one who can finish this. The music box has everything. Bank codes on page 47, witness locations on page 63, the meeting schedule for Thorne's operation on page 78. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't keep her safe from this world. Tell her I love her more than anything, and tell her to trust AR. He's not the monster everyone thinks. He's trying to find his way back, just like I was. Tears streamed down Gabriele's face as she read her brother's final words. He'd known the risk, had planned for the possibility of his death, and he'd trusted Arturo to protect her. He believed in you, she whispered. Even knowing what you were, what you'd done. He believed you could change. Arturo's expression was devastated. I didn't deserve his faith. Maybe not, but you have a chance to earn it now. Gabriele wiped her eyes, forcing herself to focus through the grief. Page 78, the meeting schedule. Arturo flipped to the indicated page. His expression sharpened as he read. Thorne holds a council meeting every month. All his lieutenants, his financial advisors, his legal team, everyone who keeps the operation running. When's the next one? 4 days from now. At the Astor Hall, under cover of a charity auction. Arturo looked up, something dangerous and calculating in his eyes. The same venue where we met. Gabriele's mind raced. We could crash it, bring authorities with evidence in hand, Catch everyone in one place with no plausible deniability. Too risky. Thorn will have security everywhere, and we still have the mole problem. We don't know who we can trust in law enforcement. Arturo tapped the ledger thoughtfully. We need something more subtle, more devastating. What if we don't crash the meeting? The idea formed as she spoke. What if we become part of it? Arturo's gaze snapped to hers, understanding dawning. The marriage contract. What marriage contract? He hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, 15 years ago, your father brokered a deal with my family. A marriage contract between me and his eldest daughter. When your sister died in the car accident, the contract should have been voided. But legally, it transferred to the next living female heir. The implication hit her like a physical blow. Me, you. Arturo's voice was careful, controlled. According to the contract, you and I are legally betrothed. It wasn't legally binding until both parties reached adulthood. Before that, it was only a symbolic alliance. Which means any assets I possess, any territories I control, become jointly owned upon marriage. Gabriele's head spun. My father arranged this? Why would he? Business. Alliances. The same reasons families have been arranging marriages for centuries. Arturo's expression was difficult to read. The contract was supposed to cement peace between our organizations. Your father thought it would protect you. Instead it made me a target. Yes. If Thorn kills you before we marry, the contract becomes void, and he can move against me without legal complications. Arturo stepped closer, his presence steady but not threatening. But if we're already married, you become untouchable. Killing you would only strengthen my legal claim to contested territory. The logic was cold, calculated, exactly the kind of strategic thinking that kept people alive in this world. But the idea of marrying someone she barely knew, even for protection. You want me to marry you, Gabriele said slowly. Actually marry you, legally. I want to keep you alive. Arturo's hand came to rest on her shoulder, gentle but firm. The marriage is a tool, a weapon we can use against Thorn. If you're at his council meeting as my wife, he can't touch you without revealing his hand. And after Thorn is taken down, you're free to leave. I'll sign whatever papers you want to dissolve the marriage. You'll walk away with your brother's justice served and your life intact. His dark eyes searched hers. I'm not asking you to tie yourself to me permanently. I'm asking you to trust me enough to use this as a strategy. Gabriele studied his face, searching for deception and finding only raw honesty. This man had killed. She didn't doubt that. Had done terrible things in service to a life built on violence. But he was also the man who'd risked everything tonight to get Aiden's evidence. Who'd promised to protect her and kept that promise even when it nearly cost his life. What do you get out of this? She asked. Really? Why are you doing all of this? Arturo's jaw tightened. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my grandmother used to tell me that every choice we make either builds us up or tears us down. That we're responsible for which direction we're heading. His voice dropped, became almost vulnerable. I've been tearing myself down for 15 years. Your brother offered me a chance to build something instead. To be someone my reflection doesn't disgust. The confession was raw, unguarded, nothing like the controlled mask he usually wore. You want redemption, Gabriele said softly. I want to prove I'm more than the monster everyone believes I am. Arturo's hand slid from her shoulder to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Your brother saw something in me worth saving. I'm trying to figure out if he was right. Gabriele's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be terrified, should be planning escape routes and exit strategies. But standing here in this warehouse, with Aiden's ledger between them and danger closing in from all sides, all she felt was a strange, fierce certainty. 4 days, she said. That's not much time to plan a wedding. Arturo's smile was sharp and beautiful and strangely vulnerable. I can be very efficient when motivated. Then let's do it. Gabriele made the choice that would either save her life or destroy it completely. Let's get married and burn Thorn's empire to the ground. Relief flooded Arturo's expression. He pulled her closer, eliminating the last inch of space between them, and Gabriele felt the hard lines of his body against hers. For a moment, they simply stood there, breathing the same air, balanced on the edge of something dangerous and inevitable. "Thank you," Arturo said quietly, "for trusting me, for giving me this chance. Don't make me regret it." "I won't." The promise was absolute. "I swear on your brother's memory, I will keep you safe, no matter what it costs." Gabriella believed him. Against all logic, despite every reason to be cautious, she believed this dangerous man would move heaven and earth to protect her. The question was whether they'd both survive what came next. The next 4 days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. Arturo secured a marriage license through connections Gabrielle didn't ask about. They exchanged vows in a civil ceremony with no witnesses, no celebration, just a judge who clearly knew better than to ask questions and 2 people binding themselves together for survival. The ring Arturo slid onto her finger was simple gold, elegant in its understatement. But when Gabrielle looked closer, she saw words engraved on the inside in Italian. "Dal buio alla luce," from darkness into light. "It was my grandmother's," Arturo said quietly. "She gave it to me before she died. Told me to give it to someone who could help me find my way back." The weight of that confession settled over Gabrielle like a benediction. This wasn't just strategy. This was real. They spent the days studying the ledger, memorizing names and faces, building a case that would be irrefutable. Arturo taught her about Thorne's organization, who was loyal, who could be turned, who would fight to the death. Gabrielle contributed her journalist's eye for detail, helping craft a narrative that would destroy not just Thorne, but the entire corrupt system that supported him. And at night, they slept in separate rooms in their new safe house, both too wary to truly rest, both hyper-aware of the approaching deadline. On the 4th day, Gabrielle stood before a mirror, while Arturo's stylist fussed with her gown, midnight blue silk that clung to her curves, diamonds at her throat that glimmered with the kind of wealth she'd never even stepped close to. She looked like someone else. Someone who belonged in Arturo's world of cultivated danger and lethal elegance. "You're staring," she said without turning, catching Arturo's reflection in the mirror. "I'm memorizing." He moved closer, and she felt his presence like heat against her back. "In case this is the last time I see you looking like this. Whole, safe, planning to get me killed tonight? Planning to do the opposite." His hand settled on her shoulders, steady and sure. "But if something goes wrong, if Thorne makes a move, I need you to promise me something." Gabrielle turned to face him. "What?" "Run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to save me." Arturo's expression was fierce, desperate. "Just run and finish what your brother started. I'm not leaving you behind. You will if I order you to." His grip tightened fractionally. "I've lost enough, Gabrielle. I won't lose you too." Before she could respond, before she could argue or promise or refuse, Arturo kissed her. Not the brief, chaste touch from the wedding ceremony, but something deeper, more desperate, a kiss that tasted like goodbye and promises neither of them could keep. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Let's go," Arturo said, his voice rough. "Let's finish this." The auction house blazed with cold elegance. The same venue where they'd met, but transformed now. Where before Gabrielle had seen glamour, she now saw threat. Every smile hid calculation. Every laugh masked predation. This was a room full of monsters wearing human faces, and she was walking among them as Arturo Ricardo's wife. They made their entrance fashionably late, ensuring every eye in the room would notice. Gabrielle felt the weight of attention like physical pressure, as Arturo guided her across the marble floor, his hand possessive on the small of her back. Whispers followed their progress. Shock. Speculation. The notorious Arturo Ricardo. Married? To a nobody? The gossip would spread like wildfire, exactly as they'd planned. "He's here," Arturo murmured against her temple, the gesture appearing intimate but carrying urgent information. 3 o'clock. Silver hair, smiling like a shark. Gabrielle didn't turn her head. She'd learned that much. Instead, she tilted her face up to Arturo's, letting her fingers trace the line of his jaw in a gesture that felt disturbingly natural. "I see him." Silas Thorne approached with the confidence of a king in his domain. Men and women orbited him like satellites, seeking favor, fearing dismissal. He looked exactly as his photograph suggested, distinguished, benevolent, nothing like the monster who'd ordered Aiden's death. But Gabriella saw beneath the mask, saw the coldness in his eyes, the calculation in his smile. This was a man who'd built an empire on suffering and called it success. Ricardo. Thorne's voice was smooth as aged whiskey. What an unexpected pleasure. And with such lovely company. Thorne. Arturo's acknowledgement was flat, devoid of warmth. His hand tightened fractionally on Gabrielle's waist. Allow me to introduce my wife, Gabrielle. The word wife landed like a detonation. Thorne's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Calculation? Reassessment? Threat. Wife, Thorne repeated, the word carrying dangerous weight. How remarkable. I wasn't aware you'd married. When did this blessed event occur? Recently. Arturo's thumb began that slow, deliberate circle against her hip. We kept it private. How romantic. Thorne's gaze raked over Gabrielle with uncomfortable thoroughness. Though I must confess confusion. I was under the impression you were bound by a rather different contract, Ricardo. One that involved the late Isabella Sawyer. The name of her dead sister made Gabrielle's blood run cold, but she forced herself to remain calm. They'd prepared for this. Isabella's death voided that contract, Arturo said, his voice carrying legal certainty. As you well know, did it? Thorne's smile sharpened. The original agreement specified the eldest daughter of Marcus Sawyer. Upon Isabella's unfortunate passing, that obligation transferred to the surviving heir. His gaze fixed on Gabrielle with predatory interest. Tell me, my dear, are you aware that your marriage to Ricardo fulfills a contract your father signed 15 years ago? I'm aware of my family's obligations, Gabrielle said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. And I've fulfilled them willingly. Willingly. Thorne savored the word like wine. How fascinating. And what does your editor think of this sudden marriage? Janet Lee has been quite worried about you. The mention of Janet, her mentor, her betrayer, sent rage coursing through Gabrielle's veins. But she channeled it, used it. Janet understands that love doesn't follow a convenient timeline. The lie came easily, built on a foundation of truth. Love didn't follow convenient timelines. Neither did vengeance. Love. Thorne's skepticism was palpable. Forgive my doubt, but this seems rather convenient. A journalist investigating Mafia corruption suddenly marries the very man she was targeting? It strains credulity. Truth often does, Gabrielle said, stepping closer to Arturo, letting her body press against his in a gesture of unity. I came to investigate corruption. I found it, just not where I expected. The implication hung in the air. Thorne's expression went cold, the veneer of civility cracking. Be careful, Mrs. Ricardo, he said softly. This world has a way of destroying those who don't understand its rules. I understand them perfectly. Gabrielle's smile was sharp as broken glass. You just don't like that I'm refusing to play by them. For a moment, tension crackled between them like electricity. Thorne's hands flexed at his sides. His security detail shifted, ready to act. The ballroom felt suddenly too small, too bright, balanced on the edge of violence. Then Arturo moved, subtle but deliberate, positioning himself between Gabrielle and Thorne. This conversation is over, he said quietly, but his voice carried absolute authority. Touch my wife, threaten her again, and what happened to her brother will look merciful compared to what I'll do to you. The promise was explicit, dangerous. And judging by the way Thorne's men shifted nervously, entirely credible. Thorne stepped back, his smile returning but colder now. Of course. Forgive my inappropriate concern. He inclined his head in mockery of respect. Enjoy the auction, Mrs. Ricardo. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other. He walked away, but Gabriella saw the coded glance he exchanged with someone across the room. Saw his hand move to his phone. Whatever temporary truce they'd achieved, it wouldn't last. We need to leave, Arturo said, his voice tight with tension. Now. But before they could move, a woman stepped into their path. Older, elegant, wearing pearls, an expression of calculated cruelty. "Arturo, darling," she purred. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your bride?" Arturo's entire body went rigid. "Carla, this isn't the time." "Oh, but it is." The woman, Carla, turned her attention to Gabriella, and her smile was poison. "Did he tell you about me, dear? About his last marriage?" How tragic it ended. Gabriella felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Last marriage? That was a long time ago," Arturo said, his voice carrying a warning Carla ignored. It was before Arturo ever learned about the Sawyer marriage contract. A contract that had been dormant and forgotten for years. 5 years. Not so very long. Carla's eyes glittered with malice. "Tell me, Mrs. Ricardo, did Arturo mention that his first wife died under suspicious circumstances? That the investigation was quietly closed despite evidence suggesting murder?" The words were calculated to wound, to create doubt, to drive a wedge between them. Gabriella felt Arturo tense beside her, felt his grip on her waist become almost painful. "Carla," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Walk away, now." "Or what? You'll kill me too?" She laughed, bright and vicious. "Your new bride should know what she's gotten herself into. Should know that you have a habit of—" "Enough." Gabriella's voice cut through Carla's monologue like a blade. She stepped forward, meeting the older woman's gaze without flinching. "I know exactly who I married. I know what he's done, what he's capable of. And I know that whatever you're trying to accomplish with this little performance, it won't work." Carla's expression faltered, surprise breaking through the cruelty. "My husband and I have an understanding," Gabriella continued, her tone cold and controlled. "We're bound by more than love or convenience. We're bound by purpose, by justice, and nothing you say will change that." It was a gamble. A performance built on lies and partial truths, and the desperate hope that Arturo would follow her lead. His hand found hers, squeezing once. Trust, gratitude, solidarity. "Now if you'll excuse us," Gabriella said, her smile sharp. "My husband promised me a dance, and I never let him break his promises." She pulled Arturo toward the dance floor, away from Carla's poisonous presence, away from Thorne's calculating gaze. They moved into the waltz position, Gabriella's hand on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, and began to move. "You didn't have to do that," Arturo said quietly. "Yes, I did." Gabriella met his eyes, seeing pain and old ghosts reflected there. "Whatever happened with your first wife, we can talk about it later. Right now, we have a role to play." "It wasn't what she implied," Arturo said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "My wife. Her name was Elena. She was killed by Thorne's people, targeted because she tried to leave me, to escape this life. The investigation was closed because Thorne owned the lead detective." Understanding crashed over Gabriella. "That's why you want to take him down. It's not just about my brother. It's about everyone he's destroyed." Arturo's grip tightened, pulling her closer. "Elena, Aiden, dozens of others. He needs to pay for all of it." "Then let's make sure he does." They danced through the rest of the song, using the movement to scan the room, to identify Thorne's security, to plan their exit. But beneath the strategy, Gabriella felt something else building. Connection. Understanding. The recognition of two wounded souls finding unexpected solidarity. When the music ended, Arturo led her off the floor toward a quieter corner. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his expression grave. "About the evidence. About how we're going to use it." Before he could explain, his phone vibrated. He checked it, and his expression went deadly calm. The kind of calm that preceded violence. "What is it?" Gabriella asked. "Thorne's making his move. He's called in his counsel early. They're meeting in 30 minutes. Arturo's gaze locked onto hers. "This is it. This is our chance." "To do what?" "To end this." Arturo pulled a small device from his pocket. "A flash drive. This contains copies of your brother's ledger. Digital, annotated, with additional evidence I've been collecting. If we can get it to the right authorities tonight, before Thorne can regroup, we can destroy him," Gabriella finished. "Yes, but it means you stay here. In this room full of his people, playing the role of my devoted wife, while I disappear to make the drop. Every instinct screamed at Gabriele to refuse, to insist they stay together, that separating was suicide. But she looked at Arturo's face and saw the same certainty she felt. This was their chance. Maybe their only chance. How long? She asked. 20 minutes, maybe less if everything goes smoothly. And if something goes wrong? Arturo's hand came up to cradle her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Then you run. There's a car in the north parking garage, black sedan, keys in the wheel well. You get out, you contact the prosecutor whose information is in your phone, and you give them everything. Arturo, promise me. His voice was urgent, desperate. Promise me you'll survive this. Gabriele looked into his eyes and saw something that terrified her more than Thorn, more than the danger closing in around them. She saw a man preparing to sacrifice himself, a man who decided her life was worth more than his. No, she said firmly. We both survive, or neither of us does. Those are the only options. Arturo's expression fractured, revealing the man beneath the carefully maintained control. I can't lose you. I've lost too many people. Then don't lose me. Gabriele rose on her toes, kissing him with desperate intensity. We make the drop together. We fight together. We survive together. When she pulled back, Arturo was staring at her with something like awe. Together, he repeated, the word carrying the weight of a vow. Always. They sealed the promise with another kiss, fierce and claiming and achingly tender. Then they turned to face the gathering darkness, hand in hand, ready to burn down an empire or die trying. The council meeting was held in a private room on the 3rd floor, accessible only by private elevator and armed guards. Arturo and Gabriele approached with the confidence of people who belonged, who had every right to be there. The guards recognized Arturo, stepped aside without question, but their eyes lingered on Gabriele with barely concealed hostility. She was the variable, the outsider, the potential threat. Inside, the room was opulent and cold. Leather chairs around a mahogany table, walls lined with first editions and expensive art that probably masked surveillance equipment. 12 men and 3 women sat around the table, and all conversation stopped when Arturo entered with Gabriele at his side. Silas Thorne sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. But Gabriele saw the calculation in his eyes, the assessment of this new threat. Ricardo, Thorne said mildly, I don't recall inviting you to this meeting, or your wife. We invited ourselves. Arturo's tone was conversational, but his body was coiled tension. I thought it was time we had an honest conversation about the future of your operation. Murmurs rippled around the table. Hostile, suspicious. One man, broad-shouldered, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stood abruptly. What the hell is this? He demanded. Who does this punk think he is, walking in here with demands? Sit down, Marcus, Thorne said quietly, and the man sat. Let's hear what Ricardo has to say. This should be entertaining. Arturo's hand found the small of Gabriele's back, a brief touch of reassurance. Then he addressed the room with the authority of someone used to command. For the past 5 years, you've been operating under the assumption that your organization is untouchable, that your connections, your money, your carefully maintained distance from actual crimes makes you immune to consequences. His voice was cold, factual. You were wrong. He pulled out his phone, connected it to the room's display system, and suddenly Aiden's ledger appeared on the wall. Pages and pages of meticulous documentation. This is a complete record of your operations. Financial crimes, murder for hire, witness tampering, political corruption. Arturo's gaze swept the room, marking each face. Names, dates, amounts, everything needed to prosecute every single person in this room. The silence was deafening. Then someone laughed. A woman with silver jewelry and cold eyes. You expect us to believe you're suddenly developing a conscience? She sneered. You, who's built your own empire on violence? This is a power play, nothing more. It's not a play, Gabriele said, her voice cutting through the dismissal. It's justice. All eyes turned to her. She felt their scrutiny like physical weight but refused to flinch. My brother compiled this evidence before you murdered him, she continued, her tone steady despite the rage burning beneath. Aidan Sawyer. Does anyone here remember that name? Or was he just another inconvenient problem you eliminated? Thorne's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or regret. Your brother was warned to stop investigating, he said quietly. He was given opportunities to walk away. He chose to ignore them. He chose to pursue truth, to fight corruption. Gabrielle's hands clenched into fists. And you killed him for it. I did what was necessary to protect this organization. Thorne's voice remained calm, reasonable, as though discussing a business decision rather than murder. He spoke with the arrogance of a man who believed everyone in the room was loyal, bought, or too terrified to betray him. Your brother threatened everything we've built. He had to be eliminated. The admission hung in the air, stunning in its casualness. Did you record that? Gabrielle whispered to Arturo. His smile was sharp, dangerous. Every word. Chaos erupted. The scarred man lunged for Arturo. Others reached for weapons. Thorne barked orders, trying to restore control, but it was too late. The careful facade had crumbled, revealing the violence beneath. Arturo moved with lethal precision, disarming the first attacker, using his momentum against him. Gabrielle grabbed a heavy book from the shelf, swinging it at a woman who came too close. Adrenaline made her movements faster, sharper than she'd thought possible. But they were outnumbered, outgunned, and the guards outside were already responding to the commotion. Go, Arturo shouted, pushing Gabrielle toward a service door she hadn't noticed. Get to the roof. Not without you. I'll be right behind you. He threw another attacker into a chair, moved like violence in human form. Go. Gabrielle ran. Through the service door, up narrow stairs that smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Behind her, she heard shouting, gunfire. Arturo's voice raised in command. She burst onto the roof, the night air cold against her overheated skin. The city sprawled below, indifferent to her terror. She turned, waiting for Arturo to follow, counting seconds that felt like eternities. He crashed through the door 15 seconds later, blood on his shirt, his expression grim. Are you hurt? Gabrielle demanded. Not my blood. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the far edge of the roof. We need to jump. What? Next building. Only way out. Arturo was already running, pulling her with him. Trust me. They hit the edge at full speed. Time seemed to slow as they launched into empty space. The gap between buildings, a chasm that could end everything. Gabrielle's scream was lost to the wind. Then they were landing, rolling, Arturo's body absorbing most of the impact, protecting her even as he fought for balance. They came up running, not stopping to assess damage or celebrate survival. Behind them, guards poured onto the first roof, weapons drawn. Arturo led her through a maze of rooftops, jumping gaps, sliding down fire escapes, using his knowledge of the city's architecture to stay ahead of pursuit. Gabrielle followed, her breath burning, her muscles screaming, adrenaline the only thing keeping her moving. They descended into an alley, Arturo checking both directions before pulling her toward a nondescript door. Where? Safe house. Different one. They don't know about this location. The interior was sparse, utilitarian. Just the basics for surviving. Nothing that suggested personality or permanence. Arturo locked multiple deadbolts, checked his phone, then finally turned to Gabrielle. Are you okay? He asked, his hands already reaching for her, checking for injuries. I'm fine. Gabrielle's legs gave out. Arturo caught her, lowering them both to the floor, and suddenly she was shaking, the delayed shock of everything that had just happened crashing over her. You're safe, Arturo murmured, holding her tight. You're safe. I've got you. Gabrielle buried her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Too fast, but steady, alive. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, they'd survived. Did you get it? She asked, her voice muffled. The recording? I got it. Thorne confessing to your brother's murder, on tape, with 14 witnesses. Arturo's arms tightened around her. We have everything we need. So what now? Now we make the drop. Get the evidence to authorities who aren't compromised. He pulled back slightly, his hands framing her face. And then we disappear. Both of us. Together. Together, Gabriella repeated, the word carrying the weight of everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived. Arturo kissed her, soft and lingering, a promise of futures neither of them had dared to imagine. Outside, sirens wailed. The city hunted them. But for this moment, in this temporary haven, they allowed themselves to breathe, to hope, to believe that justice might actually win. The drop happened at dawn. A federal prosecutor Arturo had vetted personally, meeting them in a public park with witnesses and backup. They handed over the flash drive, the recordings, copies of Aiden's ledger, evidence that would reshape organized crime prosecution for a generation. "We'll need your testimony," the prosecutor said, looking at Gabriele. "Both of you." "She'll testify," Arturo said firmly. "I won't be available, Mr. Ricardo. My testimony would be tainted. Defense would tear apart my credibility, use my own crimes to discredit the evidence." Arturo's logic was cold, inevitable. But Gabriele is a respected journalist. Her testimony carries weight. Let her be the face of this case. The prosecutor hesitated, then nodded. "We'll be in touch." They returned to the safe house. Gabriele's phone had been blowing up for hours. Calls from her editor, from colleagues, from news outlets. Word had leaked about Thorne's arrest, about the evidence, about the journalist who'd infiltrated a criminal empire and emerged with proof that would destroy dozens of powerful people. She was about to become very famous, and very alone. "You're leaving," Gabriele said, watching Arturo pack a go-bag with methodical efficiency. "I have to. Too many people want me dead now. Thorne's remaining loyalists, other organizations who see me as a threat." He didn't look at her, his movements controlled. "I've arranged protection for you. Round-the-clock security until the trials are over. You'll be safe." "I don't want to be safe without you." Arturo's hand stilled. He turned, his expression carefully blank. "Gabriele, don't." She crossed the room, stopping in front of him. "Don't give me the speech about how this was always temporary, how the marriage was just strategy, how we both knew this was coming. It was. We did. Maybe." Gabriele's hands fisted in his shirt. "But somewhere between fake marriages and rooftop escapes, it became real. At least for me." Arturo's control shattered. He pulled her against him, his kiss desperate and claiming. "Of course it's real," he breathed against her lips. "You think I'm running because I don't care? I'm running to keep you alive. Every day I stay increases the danger to you. So let me come with you." "No." The refusal was absolute. "You have a story to tell. Your brother's story. You have trials to testify at, justice to see served. I won't take that away from you." "And after? After the trials? After Thorne is convicted?" Arturo pulled back, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. "After, if you still want to find me, I'll be waiting. There's a place." He pulled a photograph from his pocket. A villa overlooking azure water, golden light spilling across stone. "I bought it months ago. Somewhere to escape to if I ever got the chance. The address is on the back." Gabrielle stared at the photograph, her vision blurring. "You're asking me to choose. I'm giving you an out. A chance at a normal life. You could walk away, build a career on the story of a lifetime, move on from all this darkness." His voice was rough with emotion. "Or you could come find me when you're ready. Build something new together. Whatever you decide, I'll understand." "You're an idiot," Gabrielle said, tears streaming down her face. "Probably. I love you." Arturo's expression cracked. "I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything." They kissed again, pouring months of tension and fear and desperate hope into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Arturo pressed the photograph into her hand. 3 months, he said. "Give yourself 3 months to testify, to process, to decide what you really want. If you still want this, want me, come find me, and if you're not there, I'll be there." The promise was absolute. "I'll wait as long as it takes." 3 months became 4, then 5. Gabriele threw herself into the trials, into her reporting, into making sure Aiden's death meant something. She testified at trial after trial, watching as Thorne's empire crumbled, as Bellini and Janet and dozens of others were convicted and sentenced, as justice finally was served. Her exposé ran as a 6-part series that won every major journalism award. She was offered book deals, speaking engagements, a position at a major paper. Everything she'd ever wanted professionally was suddenly within reach. But at night, she stared at the photograph of the villa and wondered if she had the courage to walk away from it all, to choose love over legacy. 6 months after Arturo left, Gabriele made her decision. She wrote her resignation letter, sold her apartment, packed a single bag. At the airport, her editor called one last time. "You're really doing this?" Sarah asked. "Walking away at the height of your career?" "I'm not walking away." Gabriele smiled, watching planes take off through the terminal windows. "I'm walking toward something." Finally, the flight to Rome felt endless. Gabriele clutched the photograph, memorizing every detail, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. She'd spent her entire life chasing stories about other people's lives. Maybe it was time to start living her own. The villa was exactly as photographed. Golden stone overlooking impossibly blue water, gardens bursting with lemon trees and jasmine. Gabriele stood at the gate, her heart hammering, suddenly paralyzed with doubt. What if he'd changed his mind? What if 6 months was too long? What if— The door opened, and there he was. Arturo stood backlit by warm interior light, dressed simply in linen pants and a white shirt. He looked different, lighter somehow, the weight of his former life stripped away. But his eyes, dark and intense, and holding hers with desperate relief, were exactly the same. Gabriele. Her name on his lips was prayer and promise combined. She didn't speak. Couldn't. She crossed the space between them and threw herself into his arms, and Arturo caught her, lifting her, holding her like she was the answer to every question he'd been asking. "You came," he breathed against her hair. "Always." Gabriele pulled back just enough to see his face. "I'm sorry it took so long. You're here now. That's all that matters." His smile was unguarded, joyful. "Come inside. Let me show you our home. Our home." The words settled over Gabriele like a blessing. They had months to make up for. Years of healing ahead of them. Questions about who they were now, separate from trauma and vengeance and the ghosts that had driven them together. But standing here in the golden Italian sunlight, Gabriele felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace, hope, the certainty that she'd made the right choice. Gabriele woke to sunlight and the scent of lemons. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she woke without the crushing weight of grief, without the driving need for vengeance. She woke simply to morning, and it was beautiful. Arturo's side of the bed was empty but still warm. She stretched, her body loose and content, then followed the smell of coffee to the terrace. He stood there, espresso in hand, staring out at the morning bright sea. Shirtless, tattoos on full display, hair mussed from sleep. He looked nothing like the controlled, dangerous man she'd met at that gala. He looked human, real. He had been planning this escape for years, quietly buying land, learning the rhythms of a life he never thought he'd get to live. "Buongiorno," she said softly. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face was transformative. "You're awake. I was trying to let you sleep." "I had enough sleep." Gabriele moved into his arms, feeling his warmth, his solidity. "How long have you been up?" "An hour, maybe 2. His hands traced lazy patterns on her back. "I keep waking up expecting you to be gone, expecting this to be a dream. I'm real. This is real." She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "We survived. We made it. We did." Arturo's voice was quiet, wondering. "Against every odd, we actually made it." They stood there as the sun climbed higher, warming skin and chasing away the last shadows of their past. In the distance, Gabriele could hear the village waking, bells ringing, voices calling, the ordinary sounds of ordinary lives. They were ordinary now, or as ordinary as 2 people forged in violence could become. "What do we do today?" Gabriele asked eventually. "Whatever we want." Arturo's smile was brilliant. "That's the best part. No missions, no danger, just time, As much time as we want. They spent the morning exploring the villa's grounds, olive groves and herb gardens and hidden corners that invited lingering. Arturo showed her how he'd been learning to tend the land, to grow things instead of destroying them. His hands, so skilled at violence, were equally skilled at coaxing life from soil. In the afternoon, they drove to the village market. Gabriele watched Arturo haggle with vendors in fluent Italian, watched him laugh with the elderly shopkeeper who clearly adored him, watched him be normal. "You're staring," he said, catching her looking. "I'm seeing you. Really seeing you maybe for the first time." "And what do you see?" "Someone trying very hard to be good." Gabriella took his hand. "Someone succeeding." That night, they cooked dinner together. Fresh pasta and vegetables from the market, wine from the local vineyard. They ate on the terrace as the sun set, painting everything in impossible colors. "Tell me something," Arturo said, as they lingered over the last of the wine. "Something I don't know about you." "Like what?" "Anything. Everything." He leaned back, relaxed in a way she'd never seen him. "We got married under duress, ran for our lives, barely had time to breathe. I want to know the things people learn about each other when they're dating normally. Your favorite color, what you wanted to be when you grew up, the ridiculous things that make you laugh." Gabriele felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Green, like the olive trees. I wanted to be a war correspondent when I was 12. Thought I'd be the next Cristiana Manpour." She paused, thinking. "And I laugh at terrible puns. The worse they are, the funnier I find them." "Noted." Arturo's smile was soft. "Favorite color is black. I wanted to be an architect. Design buildings instead of running criminal operations from them. And I laugh when people trip over their own feet. I know it's mean, but I can't help it." They traded facts late into the night. Childhood memories, embarrassing stories, the small details that made them human. And Gabriele realized this was what Arturo had been asking for. Not grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but the ordinary intimacy of knowing someone, of being known. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Mornings in the garden, afternoons swimming in the cove below the villa, evenings cooking, reading, existing together without agenda or urgency. They were learning each other in ways trauma hadn't allowed. The careful way Arturo made coffee, Gabriele's habit of leaving books open mid-page, the thousand small quirks that defined them. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Arturo woke gasping, trapped in nightmares of violence he couldn't escape. Some days, Gabriele found herself crying without warning, grief ambushing her at random moments. They learned to navigate each other's wounds, to offer comfort without demanding strength, to admit when they were struggling instead of pretending to be okay. "I'm afraid," Arturo admitted one night after a particularly bad dream, "that I'll never be clean of what I've done, that the monster is all there really is." "You're not a monster," Gabriele said, holding him in the darkness. "Monsters don't feel remorse. Monsters don't spend 6 months collecting evidence to honor a dead man's promise. Monsters don't learn to grow olive trees because they're trying to create instead of destroy. You see me too generously. I see you clearly. All of you. The good and the terrible and everything between. And I choose this. I choose us." "Why?" The question was raw, vulnerable. "After everything I've done, everything I've been, why choose this?" Gabriele thought about her answer, wanting to get it right. "Because you chose me first. In that ballroom when you could have let Bellini's man take me. Every day since when you could have walked away, saved yourself, left me to fight alone. You chose my survival over your safety, my justice over your freedom." She pressed her palm to his heart. "How could I not choose you back?" Arturo kissed her then, soft and lingering, a kiss that tasted like gratitude and wonder, and something that might eventually become self-forgiveness. Summer faded into autumn. The lemon trees produced fruit that Arturo taught Gabriele to harvest. They made limoncello following his grandmother's recipe, and when Gabriele took her first sip, Arturo watched her face with nervous anticipation. "It's perfect," she said honestly. His relief was palpable. Nana would be happy someone's keeping the recipe alive. "Tell me about her," Your grandmother. You've mentioned her, but I want to know her. So Arturo told stories about the woman who'd immigrated with nothing, who'd built a restaurant through sheer will, who'd believed in honor and family, and making choices that built instead of destroyed, who'd given her grandson a ring and told him to save it for someone who could help him find his way back. She was right, Gabriella said when he finished. I'm glad she saved this ring for me. She wore it every day now. The simple gold band with its engraved promise, Dal buio alla luce, from darkness into light. They were living that promise. Building a life so different from what they'd left behind, it sometimes felt like inhabiting someone else's reality. But it was theirs. Hard-won and precious and real. And as the Italian sun set behind them, Gabriella realized something simple and undeniable. She hadn't just found safety, she'd found home. Thank you for listening. If Arturo's truth hit you deep, and Gabriella's courage moved you, make sure to like and subscribe. Which moment stayed with you the most? Tell me in the comments below.